I'm here. Now what are your other two wishes? Hi, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to go through my top 24 books of 2024. I was like, should I just do top 10? I did that last year because I had a pretty bad reading year. But this year I've had quite a good reading year, so I thought, oh, let's extend it. Let's do 24 books I loved in 2024. Although that might be more like 30-ish because I do have some series I've just like put into one. But yeah, these are all the books that I read in 2024 that I loved. It's not like the best 2024 releases, it's just what I've read in this year. And I'm also not including rereads unless they've never appeared in a best books video before. I do have so much to talk about today, so I'll get straight into it, but don't forget to leave this video a like if you enjoy and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, the number 24 is Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. Now, this is a bit of a surprise because I didn't really fully love the book when I read it only last month. I don't know, it was this month. Oh my god. But since then, I've realised that if I could just switch my brain off, not be so anal about the romance that I read, then I am more inclined to enjoy them more. And that's exactly what I've done with Swift and Saddled. It is book number 2 in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. It is a cowboy romance. You don't need to read them in order because I haven't read books 1 or books 3 or anything like that. And each book in the series does follow different characters. So this one follows Ada, and she's an interior designer. She is enlisted to renovate this ranch. In there she meets Wes. Straight cowboy romance. Who would have thunk it? Who would have thought I would live long enough to see the day where I would enjoy a cowboy romance? If you hear the wind, it's extremely windy today in the UK. Or maybe I just need to close my legs when it comes to Wes because I'm thinking about him again. Oh, what a considerate man he is. Sometimes a little too considerate. I did have to suspend my disbelief in the fact that this kind of man does not exist. He's just a little bit too considerate. It's a little bit too much of a fantasy. But again, as I say, I had to switch my brain off and be like, look, just enjoy yourself. Stop thinking too much about it and just let yourself enjoy. So I did like the relationship between Ada and Wes. It did have a trope that I genuinely despise, but we're not going to talk about that today because these are my best books of 2024. But I do still think the entire story itself was very memorable. It made me very excited to read the other books in the series. And I think if a book can make me fall for a straight man, then it deserves a place in the top 24. Because when it comes to Wes, there's nothing I wouldn't do. Roll. Next question. And number 23 is The Eyes of the Best Part by Monica Kim. This one was disturbing. It was a little bit unhinged. You know when you read like a really cozy book and there's a lot of food in it and it makes you want to have that kind of food. You can smell the food, you can taste the food yourself. This is the opposite. I did not want to taste what she was putting in her mouth. So this one follows G1. Her mother's gotten into this relationship with a white man called George, and G1 just hates George. And don't we all? He's very creepy, he's not the nicest person, but G1 does develop this taste for eyeballs. I don't want to king shame, but that's fucking weird. Vile. The descriptions? Vile. The body horror? Vile. Hotel, vile. Although I do think that we could have had a more natural progression into the development of her hunger for eyes. But then again, I think, can you actually get a natural progression into something like that? I don't know. But I do think maybe the author could have done a better job at selling the hunger for the eyes more to me. That's the only like criticism I have. I need to stop criticizing my best books of the year. Jesus Christ. But no, I genuinely love the writing style of this. I thought it was very fast to read, quite quick paced. I just absolutely love following a main character who's a little bit strange. This was a book that didn't overstay its welcome, and in this day and age, I need more books like that. A lot of books are now competing to be like 1,000 to 2,000 pages long. I'm like, why? Why do you need to do that? And this told an effective story in a bit of a shorter word count, so I appreciate it for it. Like, it's not my top 20 of the year, but you know, number 23, not bad, not bad. And number 22 is A Long Walk by Richard Bachman, or otherwise known as Stephen King. This one took me by surprise because I'd never heard of it before really picking it up. I mean, I'd heard rumblings, I heard rumours, but this was never in my periphery when it comes to like Stephen King's works. This is set in a world where 100 boys, they sign up for the long walk, and you have different boys in different stages of desperation for this, or they have different reasons for joining, and some of those reasons you find out as you're on this long walk with them. But yeah, the 100 boys go on this walk and they're not allowed to slow down. If they go under a certain mile per hour, they have 3 warnings and then they're shot to death. And only one person can stay alive. So it is spanning hundreds and hundreds of miles. They're continuously walking. It's so grueling. It feels like you're on this walk with them, with the narrative. Stephen King has always been a fantastic character writer, and I feel like when he gets really into it with these characters in this book, you feel so much for them, and just knowing that really only one of them will survive at the end makes it that much more heartbreaking. That wind is winding. Oh, there are some horrific moments in it too, with some of the death scenes. You would think it would be a rather straightforward, no pun intended, straightforward journey, and so you would think that the death scenes wouldn't be that creative, but oh no. Oh no, we get there. We get there. Oh my god. And it was just so emotional. And despite me saying it was so heartbreaking, it was so very entertaining as well. As of recording this, I think this is my third favourite Stephen King out of 12? Or is it my second? No, it's third. It's my third favourite Stephen King so far. At number 21 is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. I'm so late on the bandwagon with this one. I read this one because in 2019 it was very popular, and when I did my 5-year booktube anniversary video, I picked a book that was popular for each year, and this was the one that represented 2019. So definitely late with this one. This follows Jam. She is a black trans girl. This is set in a town where there are these angels who tell everyone that there are no monsters. No monsters exist, but Jam, she accidentally bleeds onto some artwork, and therefore we have a monster. I love the storyline. The plot of it is very good, but I just love the idea that we can't really judge monsters for the way they look, but for what they do. And that is a very prominent theme in this, a very prominent message that I think I took to heart so much, because I feel like that's a message we need to take into our everyday lives. Even though this is pretty much fantasy, I still think that we can apply that to the real world. I also really love the fact that this isn't a story that you are just lowered into. You are put in the story, and it feels as if this world has already existed for a long time, and you aren't really given any exposition or any kind of info dumps into this world either. You already feel like this is a believable world. And Akwaeke Emezi has such a fantastic writing style too. I read Freshwater a few years ago and loved that, but it just solidified the fact that I do absolutely love that author, and I can't wait to read more from them. But I feel like Pet is going to be a tough act to follow, even though I think this is young adult. I think it's marketed as a young adult, and I don't really think I have very many young adult books on this list. So it speaks volumes when an author can write a book in a specific age range that I don't typically read all that much of anymore. It makes it one of the best books I've read of the year. At number 20 is Crooked House by Agatha Christie. I read this one back in January. This was like one of the first books I read this year, and it managed to stay in my top 20. This one follows the Leonides. They are this very wealthy family that live in this amazing house, but the head of the household is murdered with a fatal barbiturate injection. This was one that had been recommended over the years, but before I joined BookTube, I had no idea this was an Agatha Christie book. I don't think this is a very popular one on the same level as Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile, but I do think this one had such a compelling storyline. The movie with Glenn Close as well was so good. I really enjoyed it. But oh my god, that ending! Just like the last guy I slept with, I did not see that climax coming. It was so exciting. I didn't predict it whatsoever. Yeah, that's right. Thanks for asking. Agatha Christie did not solve this one. Why would you bring it up for? That's so mean. I wish I could have solved this one. I do feel like maybe it is solvable, but it felt like one of the most difficult ones that I've come across so far. Because with Agatha Christie books, I don't think they're the best written. I don't think they're the most engaging in terms of like what's out today. But I do think Agatha Christie books are some of the best to try and solve yourself. So in terms of interactivity, I do adore some of the Agatha Christie books. But yeah, this one was a win. For Agatha, not for me, because I couldn't solve it. At number 19 is Alice Isn't Dead by Joseph Fink. I loaned this one from the library, so I don't have a physical copy, but this one is kind of thriller, kind of horror, kind of sci-fi, kind of fantasy. It's this amazing amalgamation of a load of different genres. We follow Keisha and her wife Alice went missing 2 years before, and then randomly, while watching the news, this tragedy has happened, and Keisha can see Alice in the background, and Alice is being spotted in like these news reports of different events, different tragedies, different disasters, and yeah, Alice is just like in the background. So Keisha goes on like this road trip to find out what the fuck has happened to Alice. Alice, where the fuck is Alice? Do you know what I mean? The love that Keisha has for Alice as well, oh, is so good. I freaking loved it. There were themes of the fact that home isn't a place, but home could be a person. And I feel like this, even though it was like a bit scary at times, a bit thrillery at times, a bit sci-fi at times, a bit fantasy at times, I thought it was so well done in terms of the romance. The theme of grief is explored so beautifully throughout it as well, ties in so nicely with the main plot line. It does get quite emotional, but also quite scary as well. Oh my god, there is like this Thistle Man, or like this Hungry Man, I think it was called. And that itself was a very odd creature. That also does still fit in with the overall narrative too. Like, you think it's a little bit weird, but yeah, it's just a great story. A great story of confronting the darkness, getting over the obstacles of life. Keisha's character arc was just so good. It was so well done. And number 18 is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This was another book that I borrowed from the library, and it was one of the few 5 stars. It was the only 5-star, I think, that I got in my Library Challenge series. It is a second chance romance, and I had never read a second chance romance before, so I didn't know how I would find it. Fortunately, it was a great second chance romance to begin with. So the main characters, Yasmin and Josiah, they were married at one point, and they do have kids together, they have a business together, so they are, you know, forced to have to deal with one another. But I wouldn't exactly call it forced. It feels more like a sort of patient series of events with them too. It feels like, you know, they are the right person, but it's just the wrong time. And that's the kind of story that I've never ever read before. So it was very eye-opening to see like how that was portrayed, how we could still have that sexual tension and that yearning for somebody who we've already been with before, someone who we've given our entire lives to before. And as Cher says, do you believe in life after love? This is more like life after love after life in love. You know what I mean? The steam was off the charts, it felt so raw and honest, and even though I've never been in this position before, I've never been in their situation before, I could still feel so much relatability from it, because I thought the narrator did such a great job at making these characters feel so real, and the narrator also shared so many aspects of each of their lives that I could personally relate to, even if I couldn't relate to the whole second chance romance aspect of it, or being straight in the first place. I definitely cannot relate to that. It just felt both deep and entertaining at the same time, while exploring grief for something that still exists, and I just thought it was just so beautiful. Like, it was just a really great story. And number 17 is The List of Suspicious Things by Jenny Godfrey. This one is set during the time of the Yorkshire Ripper. This is fiction, but there are some caveats. The author, Jenny, her dad knew the Yorkshire Ripper. So the Yorkshire Ripper was a serial killer in the 70s, 80s. And there was like this mass hysteria around that time. And yeah, the author and her dad knew the Ripper. Didn't know who he was at that time, obviously, not until he was caught. But I just thought it was interesting that the author would write a fictional story based on like not just her experiences, but this like true crime case. So yeah, this is not true crime. It is a little historical, and it does highlight the life of being in Britain during the time of the Yorkshire Ripper, while we do have 2 schoolgirls who are wanting to solve the mystery or the case of the Yorkshire Ripper themselves. And so these 2 schoolgirls, they make a list of suspicious people, suspicious places, and they want to make a change. And one thing I love about the main characters in this as well is just how much they want to make a change. Being able to stand up and try and enforce that when you're a little bit younger is really good. Like, the case does last a few years, so you do see the characters grow up, so you do get that character development. I will say, if you read this, please do the audiobook as well. There are 5 different actors, because there's like 5 different characters who we kind of follow, but the main character is voiced by Anna from Downton Abbey. You know, is it Joanne or Joanna Froggatt? Oh my god. And also Gemma Whelan also narrates a character in this too, and she was in Game of Thrones. She narrates the Nevermore books. So the audiobook is absolutely genuinely fantastic, so I would totally recommend listening to that and reading along physically if you can. I don't know how many people would love this if you don't really know the politics of the time in Britain, you know, with Margaret Thatcher being in power, a lot of things that characters say about her, as well as like how her reign of terror as a prime minister kind of affected so many people in the north. There are so many things to do with that in this that, yeah, I'm not really sure if everyone's gonna love it, but because I am, you know, from the north of England, I am in areas that were affected by this and not too far from where this like took place, I could give a newfound appreciation. Also the fact that Geordies, I'm a Geordie, I'm from Newcastle, the fact that Geordies are dragged in this, literally character says, oh, there's no greater shame than being a Geordie or something like that. Hilarious, absolutely hilarious, loved it. Another aspect that I loved about this was the fact that we also got to look into the media around that time too. So a lot of women were condemned in this time because of their particular, you know, lifestyles, and the media weren't very kind to them. The media does have a lot to answer for when it comes to like the language around cases, victims, especially female victims, and I love the fact that this book also confronts that, and the characters confront that as well, because it was genuinely so upsetting what the women went through, not even just before their deaths but after their deaths, and the way that the newspapers talked about them. So I really like the fact that this was confronted in this book too. And number 16 is Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. I am so glad this made this list, because sequels have not been the strongest for me. You know, after Finley Donovan is Killing It was my #1 book of 2022, books 2 and 3 were some of the worst, and that was so unfortunate because then the series just like fell out of favour with me. Everyone in My Family's Killed Someone was my #1 book of 2023, but last year was not a good reading year. Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone was my #1 book, but only got a 4.5. I didn't have a single 5-star. This one is on par with Everyone in My Family's Killed Someone, and this has come 16th on my 2024 list. Yeah, this year has just been so much better. I feel so much better than before. Now I want to listen to the Legally Blonde original Broadway recording soundtrack. I still love this story so much. Like, we follow Ernest. He was in the first book. He made a memoir out of the events of the first book called Everyone in My Family's Got Someone. So he's now a writer. And he's on this train, along with like some other literary greats. And I can't really remember what it was for. I think it was for some kind of convention. And I love the narration style of this. I love the story style of this because we have a narrator who is actively trying to help us solve the case. The narrator will say something like, the killer is mentioned 106 times, or just give us like little clues and things. Like, the narrator is not trying to deter us from trying to solve this, and I really respect that. It made it so interactive, so fun. One of the reasons why I do love murder mysteries so much is the interactivity, like the Agatha Christie book that I mentioned. This kept me guessing because it was such an eclectic mix of, you know, secondary characters. It was a great cast of characters, actually. I had no idea what was going on. Honestly, I was just there for the ride. And I really can't tell if I love this one as much as the first one, but I do think they're equal. But this promised a good time, and oh boy did it deliver. And number 15 is a rather recent read, and that is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. It was my favourite book out of the romantasy books that I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I thought it was so good. This one follows Sirius, and she does end up stealing something that will get her entire village into trouble. And she accidentally opens up this gateway, this portal to the Fae world. And there she is like pulled in by Kingfisher. And Kingfisher is the main character love interest. And I really liked it. Like, oh, Kingfisher was quite brooding. Sometimes he got me very annoyed, but it just helped enhance the yearning. There was a little bit of insta-lust, but at the same time, if you look like Kingfisher, why wouldn't you feel insta-lust? This romance had me in the palm of its hands by the end of it. I was eating it up. But my palms were not what I wanted to be eaten, if you know what I mean. The characters were also more vastly interesting than the characters in pretty much all of the other romantasy books that I read in the Goodreads Choice Awards video, which I think just further highlights like how good this one is. You have secondary characters who feel like they are part of the narrative, not just like background fodder so that we just have someone to talk to every now and then. They actually felt like they had a point. They actually felt like they had something to say and contribute to the story. And I also love the way that the world was brought into it too. I really like the world building aspect of it. And there's still so much to learn about it. You know, there's still a lot of mystery and a lot of questions that I have about it. And there are some like alchemical alchemy elements to it that I thought was really well done. It also had my biggest buzzword of them all, found family. Or should I say buzzwords? Because that's 2 words. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was so good. And number 14 is The Laws of the Skies by Gregoire Courtois. And I read this while I was camping in the middle of the bloody woods, so it just made it even more creepier. But it is about a class of kids, and they go on this camping adventure. Honestly, terrible time to read it was camping, or maybe the best time. This class of 6-year-olds, I believe they were 6 years old, they go on this trip and with 3 of the teachers, and it's said specifically that nobody survives. The great thing about the story is that it even tells you this in the summary, it tells you this everywhere on the book, but nobody survives, and you have no idea how and why until, you know, the action starts. And I honestly was surprised. I was so surprised. I was like, is this possible? Is this possible? It really got under my skin. It's described as a Winnie the Pooh meets Blair Witch Project kind of book, and I kind of agree with that. There are some like philosophical things being mentioned in it that I wouldn't have, again, anticipated with the kind of setting and the kind of characters there are. But goddamn, I still think about it a little bit every now and then. Just absolutely terrifying, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, everything wrenching. It just was a time. But trauma is the biggest takeaway from it. That is a Gavin reads it all guarantee. And number 13 is The Har by David Sodergren. I keep wanting to say a piratey har every single time I say this title. It's got nothing to do with pirates. Absolutely nothing to do with pirates. But I related to the har. Not as a har myself, but as a whore myself. Although the heart isn't the creature. The heart is like the mysterious fog that rolls in. This one follows Muriel. I love Muriel. She was such a funny character. Oh my gosh, she's like this old lady. She has this house that she lived in with her husband when he was alive. And there are these people who are trying to buy her house, like buy the land, because they want to build something there. I can't remember what it was that they were building. Was it like some kind of golf course or something? Anyway, they want to kick her out of her home. And she's not having it. She's absolutely not having it. But one day, you know, the har rolls in and this weird creature thing comes with it. And Muriel saves it. And this creature thing, you know, starts doing things for her. And oh my god, it's so weird, but extremely gory too. Very grisly. very gnarly. Some of these scenes I will not shake from my head. Some of it I was rooting for though. I was rooting for some of it. Because how dare you try and kick this old lady out of her home? I love the sense of community in this one. I love the sense of building a foundation somewhere with someone and kind of honouring that. Honouring history, honouring family history in particular. There's quite a lot of beautiful messages within this. Even with the really disgusting things that happen, it still has a very beautiful message. So despite it being a gore fest, it also had heart. At number 12 is The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. Oh my god. I think I originally gave this one 4.5 stars, but I'm like bumping it up to a 5. But I really love this one. So we follow Dev, although the audiobook narrator pronounced it Dave. So I will say Dave. And he is like this runner on a Bachelorette type TV show. And one of the main bachelors who is part of the next season is Charlie. And Dave falls in love with Charlie. Charlie falls in love with Dave. And it's just so cute. I just freaking loved it. Because like this was one of the few male romances that I read this year, which is honestly not that great because I should be reading a lot more. It's just like a little bit hard for me to get into romance sometimes, but I am trying to be less anal about it while reading more anal. But it really helped that I just love the characters so much. I loved how Dave was to Charlie. Dave felt like a support system for Charlie, especially since Charlie is OCD and anxiety. I thought that representation was so fantastic. The Bachelor kind of backdrop of this as well, with Charlie being a contestant, is so entertaining. I love romance books where there is a genuine plot and the romance just happens to happen around it. That's what this felt like. This isn't about characters going on dates and finding things out about one another. They find out about one another around the plot, and I love that. I will say the third act is a little bit ridiculous. I couldn't find it quite believable, and I mentioned this in the vlog that I read it in. I even go into spoilers because I felt so passionately about the believability of it, but I'm trying to not be as much of a Grinch anymore. They love to call me the gay Grinch because I like to take weird joy from everything apparently. But I am here to say this is a Christmas miracle. I'm about to give back to the romance. I'm about to give back to gay love. This holds so much space in my heart right now. At number 11 is The Dead Zone by Stephen King. This one was probably my biggest surprise of the year. I had low expectations going to this one because this isn't one of Stephen King's most prominent books that I've heard of. I don't really see a whole lot of people talk about this one when I see people's Stephen King rankings or anything like that. It feels like this one flies under the radar, and I love the fact that our main character, John Smith, yes, his name is John Smith, or Johnny Smith, like the most boring of names, but he has this power, he has this gift. He wakes up from a coma and he is able to see people's future and past. And when I tell you, even though this book is quite girthy, this was so entertaining, so intriguing. I talked about this one so much in the vlog I read it in as well. Oh my gosh. There is a specific storyline in this one that takes Johnny Smith to Castle Rock and he has to like solve this serial killer thing that goes on, and oh my god, that part was so fucking great. I loved it. And there is a character called Greg as well. Very timely as well, because Greg is like running for president. He's an awful person, like really bad. Like when we meet Greg, he kicks a dog. Like it's just awful. Like you hate him so much. And I love the fact that I could have these like visceral reactions to characters, and this book really did that for me. And maybe this does feel like a few different books in one. I genuinely didn't mind that at all, because it felt like it was going across like, you know, a vast amount of time. There was like a little bit of a romance element. So Johnny was dating someone when he goes into, you know, his coma, and then afterwards he finds out that she's, you know, a wife and she has kids, and so he has to kind of deal with that. And I kind of love the exploration of that so much too. So much to love about The Dead Zone. Definitely an underrated gem of Stephen King's, in my opinion. I just have so much love for it. Oh my god, getting into my top 10 now. At number 10 is Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell. Oh, this one was so good. In fact, actually might deserve a couple of higher places, but I'm putting it here. This is actually another queer story, so yay. This one is just so weird though. Like this is a cozy horror romance kind of thing. We follow Shisheshan, and she is like this creature. She's this weird monster thing, and she falls in love with a female human. Shisheshan gets into like a little bit of a scuffle with some hunters, and we get Homily start to mend her, get her back to health, and the story just goes from there. Homily's whole family aspect of this too was incredibly interesting. Seeing Shisheshan learn to love a human without all of those monstrous aspects, like, you know, eating Homily alive, for instance. Like, you shouldn't do that when you're in a relationship. There are things that she has to learn and overcome that is just, like, so adorable in a way, but also the body horror in this, like, there is still so much horror in this, so much body horror. A lot of fantasy, though. This is quite fantasy heavy, so there are aspects of, like, monster hunting and, like, villages of people against monsters, some messy family drama. Oh, it's just so brilliant. It's so good. Yeah, it could probably end up getting higher on the list At the minute it's number 10, and it was a really great time as well reading this with Gabby and Katie earlier in the year too. Oh my gosh. If you ask me, out of the 3 videos that we did, and the 3 books we read, this was the one that I picked, and I do believe this was the best choice. I believe that with my whole heart. And number 9 is Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi, and I thought this was so atmospheric, so great. I love horror books that have a lot of atmosphere. This one is set in an orphanage of boys, and one day this group of men come, and one of them has like strange carvings on him, and this man is like trying to bite people. It felt a little bit The Troop by Nick Cutter. This man is trying to bite people, and then he dies, and then there's like this strange wind, and then strange things start happening in this orphanage. Oh my gosh, heartbreaking at the same time too. Heartbreaking what happens, because you do end up feeling attached to these characters. You root for them, you want them to survive. But I feel like the atmosphere is definitely the best thing about this book. It felt very gothic, it felt very dark. There was like some like religious kind of horror as well, which I know can be hit and miss with some people, but this like really struck me. Like, it was very, very well done. And because I was so unsettled and because so many things broke my heart, I was never bored. I felt like this was very fast paced. Some horror books go a little bit too long, but this one was like the perfect length, honestly. The setting of this was just absolutely incredible. It was just amazing. I loved it. I need to put my wine down for the next one. Oh my god. And number 8 is the Raven Cycle series by Maggie Stiefvater. I didn't give a single one of these 5 stars, by the way. I love the first 2. They were like 4.5, and then Blue Lily Lily Blue was 3.5, and The Raven King was 2.5. So the fact that this isn't my best books, I mean, it's not. The Raven King is not my best books, but I mean like the Raven Cycle series as a whole, the reading experience, in just all of it, just the entire story. One of my favourites of the year. Even though not a single 5-star was yet, and it's beaten some of my 5 stars, I just loved the story. This reminded me why I love classic young adult literature. And when I say classic literature, I mean from like the 2010s, the 2000s. I love those kinds of stories, and I've missed them so much. And this one reminded me how much I loved stories like this. So I feel like everyone's obviously already read this one. But yeah, we do have like Blue and the Raven Boys. They're dynamic. Their connection is so amazing. I love Ronan. Ronan is my favourite. I love Ronan. I love Chainsaw. Oh, so good. Like, the characters I just fell for. I absolutely fell for. I was rooting for Blue and Gonzi. Adam. Some of you know how I feel about Adam. Some of you do. And if I say any remarks about my feelings towards Adam that goes against my opinion, you will be blocked and reported. But I will say by the end of the series I did like Asterix Adam, in a loose sense. But yeah, I just love the story. Love the whole ley lines aspect of it. I love the fact that Blue is destined to kill the person she loves through a kiss. And just like the complexities around that one, because I feel like it gives you like such a definitive idea of what this book series is probably going to be. But no, forget all of that. I love the hunt and the quest for the Raven King. Was I disappointed by the end? Absolutely. I didn't think it was the best ending of the series that I could have had. But the journey of getting there was definitely worth it, in my opinion. I just wish I'd read it sooner. And so I couldn't just put one book in. Otherwise, it would probably be like number 24, 25. But the entire series as a whole, and I don't think that makes any sense whatsoever, is in my top 10. It is number 8. Back to my wine. And number 7 is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This is so good, but so heartbreaking at the same time. Oh my gosh. I was getting so annoyed. I love this, but I got so frustrated at the very beginning of this. We have Robert, and he has this altercation with this arsehole white boy, who has this arsehole white father, who gets Robert sent to the reformatory for 6 months. Oh my god, Robert's sister Gloria was glorious. I loved her. I also really loved Robert. I really was rooting for him to get out of the reformatory. There were scenes at the funhouse that got me so uncomfortable, and oh my gosh, there were so many scary things about this. There are like haunts or like ghosts, and they were very scary too, but I feel like you can't get any scarier than the humans, like the actual people in this. What's his name? Haddock. Fucking Haddock. Fucking hate him. He was the worst of the worst. One of the worst characters. Like, definitely like well written by Tananarive Due, I thought, because you know, he elicits so much emotion in me and so much hatred. So he's a very well written character, but oh my god, my most loathed. I hated Haddock so much. But honestly, even though this is a bit of a longer book as well, not a single boring moment for me. But I couldn't stop reading because I wanted so much for a happy ending. I will not tell you if there was a happy ending or not, but I needed to know. I needed to know if Robert got out of there, as well as some of the other boys in the reformatory. And so I couldn't stop reading because I needed answers. It didn't drag whatsoever despite being long as well. There were different POVs. We get to see Gloria's POV as well, and that kept the story moving, and it kept it very interesting as well. was just so good. So fantastic. Number 6 is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. This is my highest ranked Stephen King book. So it didn't quite make my top 5, even though I've been really loving reading Stephen King this year. Salem's Lot I had never read before. I had never even seen an adaptation of it before. So I didn't really know what I was getting into when I started it. But this one is, well, we follow Ben. He is a writer. He goes to Jerusalem's Lot. He meets the people there. I love the way Stephen King writes characters. I love how mundane it felt in this town at first. There was a whole chapter dedicated to how mundane their lives are, and then shit hits the fan. There is a mysterious stranger. There is like a vampire called Barlow. People are turning, and it's just wall-to-wall batshit crazy by the end of it. It got so exciting so quick, so atmospheric. I think this is definitely Stephen King's most atmospheric book so far that I've read. I loved Marston House too. Felt like a character on its own. I loved how it would watch the town. Not that it was actually sentient or anything, it just the way that Stephen King writes this made it feel like the Marston House was as just an important a character as anyone else. I love the creepy lore around the house. I love the creepy lore around the entire town. Like once we see people turning into vampires and like the rapid rate it goes, and we really root for certain characters to either get it or don't get it, because there are again like some awful characters in this too who you root for to die, but it was a town that felt so alive in a way that only Stephen King could do it. I love it when it said it was as if God himself had turned his face away from them. Like how desolate is that? I love how desolate and bleak and hopeless it was beginning to feel. Such a captivating story, really. It reaffirmed my love for vampires. It did. And number 5 is Battle Royale by Caution to Carmen. Oh my god, this is another one that is very Hunger Games-esque. So we had the long walk. Like, so we have a class of students who get dropped off on this island. It's not like an island with just like trees and stuff, but there's like actually a school on this island. There's a residential area on this island. I love the fact that as well, this island has forbidden zones. And the students aren't allowed in a certain square at different times, so that keeps the story moving. And these kids are told that they have to kill one another until only one survives. And these kids know one another, like they're part of the same class. And they're looking at each other, well I say kids like teens, which are still kids. They know one another, which is like an advantage this gets over something like The Long Walk or The Hunger Games, because these are friends. Like they know one another, and it's like that much more heartbreaking when they realise what they have to do. And it just gets straight into it. Oh my god, and it doesn't stop until the end. You have different sections with different characters, so you get a chance to feel for them, and then you think, oh, is this hopeless? Is there any reason to feel for them if they're just gonna die? But you still can't help but feel for them anyway. Like, it's just such an exciting story. The writing itself is incredibly sinister, the way it happens. Like, it feels like the narrator itself is creeping on these characters, leading to us asking, who is the real enemy? Like, who are we actually fighting? What are we fighting for? You can feel the paranoia and the fear and the tension and the horror in the writing. Don't write this off because it's so massive. It will still hook you the entire way through. Ash, that's my seat, baby. You're on my seat? Why? Why? I only went downstairs to grab a new battery. Why'd you steal it for? Why'd you steal it? What am I going to do now? Where am I going to sit? I'm literally going to have to sit on my mum's double basket air fryer that I've got her for Christmas. And number 4 is Dungeon Crawler Call by Matt Dinniman. This one again I only read a couple of weeks ago, and I fell in love quick. It was so funny. A few of the jokes are not funny, but overall it's funny. It's a lit RPG. Had never read it before. We follow Carl and Princess Donut. Princess Donut is his ex-girlfriend's cat, who he kind of unwillingly looks after. We have this alien invasion that takes over the world, and whoever's left to survive is put into like this dungeon, and there are like different levels to this dungeon, and they have to go through every level. So every level of the dungeon feels like a video game. It's so good. It's so entertaining. If you're going to read this, I would recommend listening to the audiobook as well, because it's narrated by Jeff Hayes, and the voices he does, so funny, so great. Princess Donut, a talking cat, what more do you want? But no, this was probably like the most imaginative book that I read this year. I love the video game feel of it. I loved how much it made me feel too, because I was instantly drawn into Carl's world. I love like the loot prizes and the random voice that comes in every now and then, like, hey, new achievement, da da da. It was so good, so funny. Whatever the opposite of boring is this book. I loved it that much I overnighted a physical copy, because I started the audiobook, and before I'd even gotten halfway through the audiobook, I was like, okay, I'm getting a physical copy. And I'm getting it tomorrow, please and thank you. It was the quickest I'd bought a book in my life when just like starting it. The humour might not land for everyone, but it mostly hit for me. I seriously recommend it. It's so fun. So fun. I forgot to move my light, and now it's moved in the right place. Ash has messed everything up. Hope you're happy. I hope you're happy now. And number 3 is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This was my very first 5-star read of the year. That wasn't a reread and wasn't a manga. So the fact that this was my first true 5-star of the year and it's number 3 blows me away. This is about a woman called Dana in 1976 and she keeps getting pulled back into time during the 19th century where she seems to be attached to this white boy called Rufus, and it's in the time of, you know, plantations and slaves. So Dana being in this time period is one of the most dangerous time periods she could be in. So I was scared for Dana the entire time. The story had me on the edge of my seat because of how much I cared about the character. I also loved the fact that the sci-fi element of this, of being like pulled back in time and then going back to her time, was done in such an intricate way. Like, I'd never seen it done like this before in a book, and it felt so natural and so easy. It really does solidify Octavia E. Butler as such a fantastic author. Need to read more books from her. But this was so hard hitting, like my stomach again just fell through my ass when I was reading this. Again, like, I've never hated so many people before in my life. Dana was a true force of nature. She had so much grace and compassion. So many things I look up to her for. And again, I'm astounded that it took me this long to read the book, and 2, the fact that it just stuck in my top 3 for the entire year. This has a very direct and confrontational writing style that kept me engaged as a reader. I couldn't stop. As soon as I started this book, I could not stop. So at number 2, my second favourite book of the year is The Will of the Many by James Islington. I would 69 this book if I could. I love it that much. I was captivated the entire time. It was one of my first immersion reads of the year. I read this back in end of March, start of April, and it did set off my love for more immersion reading. Even though my number 1 pick is like the best immersion experience I've ever had, ever, and that's why they're my number 1. But I'm not talking about that just yet, I'm talking about this. So this one is set in a world where this hierarchy are ruling the world. They're called the Catalan Empire. We follow an orphan called Vis who gets accepted into this academy. Oh my gosh. The twists and turns, I was wigless, I was gagged, I was gooped. I could not look away. I was just so captivated by the goings on of this academy, as well as like Viz's training, like the competitions that he was doing, like all the tests and things. Oh my gosh, like I thought I was over academy books. I thought I was over books that were kind of set in schools. This book was like, no bitch, you still love them. And I loved all the settings in this book too. We have like a prison, we have an amphitheatre, we have the academy itself. It just felt like I constantly wanted to look around in this world and see what was going on around the characters and the plot, because there was just so much to see. It was just like love at first sight, love at first read. There were some moments when you thought you would be lulled into a false sense of security, and then something would happen and would pull you back in. You were not allowed to look away. You were not allowed to be bored during this. It was so exciting. I cannot wait to reread it when the sequel comes out. A true 5-star in every sense of the word. Which leads me to my number 1 of 2024. You're gonna think, oh, this is so anticlimactic, what a cliche. Well, let me get my wine before you start calling me all the names under the sun. I was speaking with a friend of mine, Jimmy Nuts, a couple of weeks ago. I said, I don't know what my favourite book of all time is. I don't even know if I have a favourite book of all time. And I still think that stands a little bit. But if anything is going to come close to being my favourite book of all time, it's going to be this. The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. This was a reread, technically. I first read these books in 2019, but for some reason I didn't put these books in my best books of 2019 video. I mean, I did read these the month before I joined BookTube, but I still thought I would have included it. So that is why I said at the very start, oh, I will only include a reread if it's never been in the best books video before. And also, the first time I read these books, I just gave them a blank 4 stars. Like, just all of the books 4 stars. Not this time. Not this time, bitch. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. The reading experience itself was so incredibly magical to me. It's the best reading experience I've ever had of anything ever. I listened to the audiobook narrated by Andy Serkis while reading these books physically while staying at a replica Shire house. It was a house in the Shire. How much more perfect can you get? You cannot immerse yourself in a world more than what I did when I read this book. And so for that and that alone, my favourite books of 2024, my favourite reading experience of 2024, one of my favourite reading experiences of all time. I do not need to tell you what the Lord of the Rings series is. Do not tell me you've never read these books before in your life. If you haven't read these books before in your life, I'm joining Aaron from Booked and Busy for a reread of this, January to April 2025 if you want to join. I will link the announcement video in the description if you want to join in. I will start shit with my co-hosts if any of them don't like this. I just love Tolkien's world. I love how comforting Tolkien's world is. I love how drawn in you are from the beginning. You are welcomed into the Shire with open arms. The characters are so iconic. The story is so iconic. I've never known characters I've fallen in love with so much in my life. Sam, Frodo, their journey with the Fellowship, Merry, Pippin, Gandalf, all of them. Iconic. The story is just so good. And it sounds like a cliche now. It sounds like every other fantasy you've ever read maybe. But this was the blueprint. This is what started it all. I think. I might be wrong on that. No, I do think Tolkien is like the granddaddy of fantasy, right? The granddaddy of epic fantasy, and for good reason. I don't think anything is going to top my reading experience of these books. I love them so, so much. And the video I did when I went to the Shire House and read these is filled with spoilers, so if you want more thoughts, please do check it out. It's probably my favourite video I've ever done. So this series and the reading experience means so much to me. And I don't know if you've ever felt the same way. Like you've read a book and the experience of reading it itself, maybe it was like where you were at that time in terms of setting, not just setting, but maybe your mind, where your mind was at that time. I don't know if that's ever factored into your rating of a book, or if you have like those standout reading experiences in your life too. I would love to hear them, by the way, if you do. I just love this so much. I cannot wait to go through these again. And probably the closest I have to being my favourite books of all time. I'm still so unsure what that actually means to me. One day I hope to find out. And these bring me one step closer. But yeah, that was my top 24 books of 2024. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do give it a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave all your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of my list. Is there anything that I read that you loved or anything I read that you hated? I don't mind if you state the things I talked about in this video. Just keep it respectful, okay? Also, let me know what your favourite books of the year were, because I would love to find out and I would love to get some recommendations from you too. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting my channel. If you'd like to join my Patreon, then the link is in the description box. But yeah, I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye!